you know what? Good morning, afternoon, I'm sorry, welcome. Good to be back. Missed you all. I hope that you're doing well out there and eager to get a few tips here on the Deal Doctor live stream. Couple of announcements to start out with. Ninja installation is coming up. If you haven't signed up already, do so as quickly as you can. It is the 23rd into the 26th of this month. It is well worth it. I learned so much when I went through it about 6 years ago, and I encourage anyone to do it, whether you're new in the business, mid-range, or experienced in the business. It's going to help you. If you are struggling to get a consistent flow of business, this is going to help you do that. So please, don't miss out on the Ninja installation program if you have the ability to do it. Company meeting is tomorrow. Yay! Should be exciting. Should be fun. There's going to be some sort of a light, maybe continental breakfast sort of thing at 8:30, and then the program is going to run from 9 to 12 at Watermark Country Club. Hope to see as many of you there as possible. Come up, if I haven't met you, please come up and say hello. I would love to at least put a face with names and so on. So always eager to meet our agents. The topic sort of today is building relationships with other realtors. And I'm not talking about five-star realtors, because hopefully we get that opportunity through company meetings and through 5-Star Connect and all of those things, golf outings, that we get to establish relationships with one another. I'm talking about building relationships with other realtors outside of 5-Star. And let me go take you back a long time ago, about 30 years ago, when everybody represented the seller. All of the realtors represented the seller. Now, that wasn't such a great deal for the buyers, and we'll admit that. But everybody, all of the realtors, had the same goal in mind. They were representing the sellers, and so they all worked together pretty well to represent that seller and get the house sold and closed and so on. Then along came buyer agency. And buyer agency had its good side and it had its bad side. The good side obviously was that buyers now had representation. Now they had an advocate on their side when they were involved in a transaction. The bad side is that advocacy sometimes turned adversary. In other words, the relationship went from being a cooperative effort between realtors to help put buyers and sellers together, to being this sort of battle like a courtroom. As you know, our legal system is based on an adversarial relationship where one wins and one loses. It's not necessarily seeking out justice. It does in rare cases, but basically there's a defense and there's a prosecution, and one of them is going to win and one of them isn't. And more we have seen our industry move in that direction, that we have two advocates for our clients, a buyer and a seller, and they find themselves too often, I think, in adversarial situations where they're butting heads with another realtor. And I encourage you to go out of your way to start building relationships with other realtors. Recently, 5-Star had a situation where it required that I contact another realtor who I had pretty much started in the business with many years ago, and we were sort of youngsters in the business back then. And over the 30 years that we have practiced real estate together, him for a different company and me for a couple of different companies, we've had a mutual respect. And a situation occurred where I was able to call this broker and say, can you help me out here? Can you help our agents get through this? And he was able to help on his side, as I was able to help on my side, fix a situation that occurred simply by a phone call, rather than a bunch of emails or texts or amendments going back and forth, addendums. And we sometimes forget that having a conversation and understanding one another's position is some kind, can very often help resolve a situation much more easily, because you understand the context and the subtext of the position that they're trying to communicate. We sometimes lose that in text messages because we get snippets of information. We even lose it in email. So I encourage you to get to know your fellow realtors outside of 5-Star, because there may come a time when you will need them to help you. And not necessarily on a specific transaction, but maybe with another agent that they know and can have some influence with. Again, whether it's going to the Women's Council Christmas party or events that happen at GRAR, I encourage you to get, reach out, shake your hand, say, hi, I'm, so-and-so from 5-Star, and like to say hello. I think you'll find the more of those relationships that you can build over the length and the duration of your career, you're going to find it's going to be very, very helpful in being more successful when it's time to present an offer and get an offer closed. I know that sometimes when I present an offer, I'm very careful about how I write it, but I also have built a reputation with other agents and brokers that when they get my offer, they go, we know that this offer is going to close. And I cross my fingers that they're right. But sometimes your offer will get accepted because they trust you and they have faith in you because they know you. So I encourage you to get to know the other realtors out there who are operating in your areas. Make friends with them, be cordial, try to avoid adversarial situations. They're going to occur. We all have different personalities, and trying to deal with 3,000 or 4,000 different personalities is a challenge. We have to advocate for our clients, but by the same token, we can do so on a professional, tactful way that will ultimately benefit our clients. So that's my thought for the day. I'm not done yet, but that's a thought for the day. Question came up about reserved things. I know that you've seen on listing cards, for example, that the seller reserves a particular cherry tree. They may have planted it for their child when they were small, and they want to remove the tree and take it to their new property. Let's say that it's not during the dormant season, so you can't move the tree until, let's say, November, for example. And so the listing contract stipulates in there that the seller reserves the tree, but it doesn't say when they're going to remove it, and it doesn't say what the consequences are if they don't remove it. Does the tree then become the property of the buyer, and does the buyer have the right to chop the cherry tree down? Well, actually, The seller has no rights whatsoever to any of it if that isn't reiterated in the purchase agreement, because the purchase agreement supersedes the listing contract. So when it comes to issues like reserved items, whether it's a stove or it's a cherry tree or whatever it is, that reservation must be stipulated, and the consequences must be stipulated in the purchase agreement, or it is not enforceable. The listing contract is between the listing agent company, listing broker, and the seller. It is not between the buyer and the seller. So the purchase agreement is what is between the buyer and the seller. So whatever that reservation is, whatever that stipulation is, has to be on the purchase agreement. It has to have specifics like the date that they're going to remove the cherry tree, and if the cherry tree isn't removed by November 20th or whatever the date might be, that the cherry tree will then become the property solely of the buyer. So there have to be consequences, dates, and specifics put into the purchase agreement in order to make that listing contract clause enforceable. I hope that helps. What else we got today? Let's just see. Oh, what happens if you don't close on time? We've never gotten this question before. Actually, we get it all the time. What happens if we're supposed to close the deal tomorrow and we don't yet have mortgage approval? What happens? What are our options? Well, we have several options. One is the seller can say, I've had enough, I quit, I don't want to play anymore, and put it in writing that they terminate the contract. And then see what happens. Because some of our purchase agreements are time is of the essence contracts where you have to live by the deadlines stated in them, like GCAR. And some of them are a little more loose, like GRAR, like the WMLA, the West Michigan Regional Purchase Agreement. So in order to put some teeth into those that are not time is of the essence contracts, you can have the seller fill out something, an addendum that says, based on the buyer's inability to perform according to the contract, we, the seller, hereby terminate the contract. That's one option. Now, obviously, that means that the seller has to put the house back on the market. Maybe that's not what they want to do. By the same token, the buyer has the right to terminate the contract if they have not been given a mortgage approval yet. So if they don't have a mortgage approval, they have the right to terminate the contract based on their inability to get a mortgage within the time frame of the purchase agreement, stipulated in the purchase agreement. What happens if there is an appraisal that comes in, and let's say it comes in low, so they do a second appraisal, and the buyer agrees to have a second appraisal done. And you're waiting for the second appraisal to come in, and that appraisal comes in at the purchase price. Does the buyer have the right then to go back and go, wait a minute, I want to renegotiate because the first appraisal came in low? No, they don't, because they gave up that right when they agreed to have a second appraisal, and so now they can't simply terminate based on that. But again, let's go back to the question at hand, which was what happens when you don't close. So the seller can fill out an addendum that terminates the contract and send it over, which means that they get to put their house back on the market and try again. Buyer potentially has the same ability to put it in writing that based on their inability to get a mortgage within the time frame, so long as they didn't do something to damage their credit in the meanwhile, the likelihood is that they're going to get their earnest deposit back. The third option is that they can both agree in writing in an addendum to extend the contract to a specific date. And again, I encourage you to be very specific and not say buyers and sellers agree to extend the closing to September 30th. What happens September 30th? There's the consequences part. So you have to add the part in there if this closes, if this fails to close through no fault of the buyer or the seller, the buyer will receive their earnest money deposit back, and this offer shall be deemed null and void. Or you can say, if it doesn't close by September 30th, both parties reserve the right to offer an extension of the contract at that time. But you have to be specific about what the consequences are if it doesn't close by September 30th. You just can't say, well, we extend the closing to September 30th. Well, so what? Now you're getting into a situation where you're kicking the can down the road. Now you're getting into a situation where if you were in front of a judge, he would say, or she would say, wait a minute, you were all just skipping merrily down the road in hopes that this deal was going to close. Nobody had any teeth in this contract, and I'm not going to allow it to be arbitrarily and unilaterally terminated simply because a date has been missed and it appears that it may be able to be closed within the next few days or a week. So if you are in that situation, what happens if you don't meet a close date? You have to start asking yourself the question, what's the reason for it? Is it worthwhile to put it back on the market? Can the buyer still get financing, or do they have a hope of getting financing? And then act accordingly in a written addendum, whatever that is. If you have questions on that, I have a little question thing right here that Dom will send me the question if you write it out. Okay. 'Last item up for bids. 2020 is coming soon. Between 2020, we're going to start seeing pumpkins and Halloween costumes and some turkey and dressing and Christmas shopping and Christmas trees and all of those things are wonderful things. Some of us have been running our little legs off all year long, 3/4 of the year, and we're tired. We're just tired. And so we're looking forward to taking a breather, enjoying the holidays, and we have a tendency to step away for a few Christmas parties, family parties, so on and so forth. And then we're surprised when in 2020 we don't have any business until April. So what I'm encouraging you to do is to avoid letting your head get out of the game. By all means, we need and deserve and have some obligation to family time. There's no question about that. I will be. My family is going to come first in the holidays. So there may be times when you call me and I'm with my family and I'm not going to answer. But the point is, at some time in this next few months, it's a great time to build your foundation for 2020. Go out and get listings. Update your database. Start calling your database, even though it seems like an odd time of year to do it because the market mentality tends to be slowing a bit. But if you're out there calling them saying, hey, I just wanted to touch base. It's been a great year so far. I'm looking forward to helping you now or in the near future. If you have a referral, if you know somebody who might be thinking about making a move, could you tell me their name? Just getting in contact, sending a letter, sending postcards, letting people know that you're in the business, posting on Facebook, asking other agents in your office if it's okay to post their listing on your Facebook page or even agents of other brokers, provided you get their written permission to do so. I know that we can do it without asking permission, but then we're kind of stuck in a situation where they call you and say, hey, take that off my page. I'm not giving you permission. I think it's better to do it up front. Again, it's about building relationships with other agents. So I do it proactively. I call an agent if I want to post their listing on my page and say, hey, Charlie or Sue or whatever, can I post your listing? Looks like a great listing. Can I post that on my page? I'll give you all the credit in the world for it. But if I pick up a buyer because of somebody on my page who saw it, would that be okay? And 9 times out of 10, I get a yes. So keep your head in the game for the next 4 months, and you'll have a good 2020 if you start building on that activity. Kind of start the momentum now so that you start having closings in January and February and March when everybody else is just getting geared up. I encourage you, strongly urge you, I don't know how else to say it, but tomorrow's company meeting is going to be very, very important for those who want to have a strong 2020. I know what Greg's going to tell you if you show up. Please do. In the meanwhile, have a great one. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you tomorrow.